Y'all, we have made it to the end of the road for Love and Marriage Huntsville. What a season, what a year. And to wind down with this finale for the reunion, I gotta rate the episode on a scale of 1 to 10. I mean, while I don't think it was as explosive as last episode, I'm still going to give it a 10 because I was satisfied. I felt like 3 parts was appropriate for this reunion. I felt like we got to hear from everybody. I felt like everybody was active. There was comedy. The producers did an amazing job with getting those facial reactions from everybody. I definitely feel like if we touched on this briefly, if they used a filter, I felt like this was probably the best use of the filter. And again, filter me. Actually, this application right now, like I typically film my recaps in StreamYard because I like to be able to, if I want to pull up graphics while I'm talking, I like to be able to just do it, while I'm in the app, right? But there's actually a filter feature on here. Now, I don't have it on for this video or anything like that, but I am saying if I'm going to be on national television, I mean, go ahead and give me that filter. You know what I'm saying? I mean, make the little nooks and crannies and things like that. Make me look even better, baby. Make me look good. All right. Um, but having said that, I felt like I was satisfied. If I had to give this season a rating overall, I'm going to probably give it a 9.9. I'm going to take away a little teensy bit of a point because I mean, it was 30 something episodes. So we definitely got our feel of Huntsville for the year, but I would say that for the most part, I felt like they made clever and good use of the episodes. I'm still not a fan of the A and B season formatting, but it seems like we're not going to escape that. So here we are. Okay. So let's talk about this reunion, part 3. We pick up where we left off with Melody and Miss Betty, who is Stormy's mom, still going at it, arguing back and forth. And Melody does try to redirect the conversation back to Stormy, and then so does Carlos as well. And Stormy talks about how things can get crazy with the fans. So I felt like what she was trying to say is that she just wishes that Mel would have maybe corrected some of the I guess many of the fans for in this idea that it wasn't clear who was recording Melody, I guess maybe in her home. Again, I thought at the time when that came out that she was accusing, without saying a name, Destiny. But apparently the peoples thought different. Okay. Now, and I only thought that because I felt like we saw another episode after that with Destiny playing a recording for Martell. I just cannot recall what was in that recording or why we were hearing it because there's been so many episodes. But I mean, I'm not going to complain about having content, okay? Because it could be dry. All right. We've been looking for Real Housewives of Atlanta for 4 months, and they ain't even figured out the cast yet. Okay. Well, the streets are bubbling. I will say that the streets is bubbling with some casting tea, but we ain't gonna talk about that today. I will say though that Sheree would not be on my list, okay? Because now that I know that she is just simply doing the acting allegedly in the business arrangements, I'm not a fan of hers, and I'm definitely not a fan of the actor Martell being back for next season. Now, let me state the obvious. I am not the type of person that says because I don't like someone on the show does not mean that they don't belong on the show because you have to respect your villains, right? If you don't have villains, then you don't really have a well balanced show. There's always got to be somebody who acts as the antagonist. And I think Martell really does a good job of that. The problem that I think we have with Martell is that how far do we go in being an antagonist, and then how far are we going with antagonizing? Okay. Because we know that there's been the arrests. We know that there's been the revenge P that's allegedly taken, or there's been some allegations of revenge P. Okay. And so, with all of that in mind, and then you coming out and basically saying that you're an actor, to me, that discredits the work that everybody is doing on the show. And while we understand that there's a lot of setup in reality TV, I just kind of feel like once you go there and you say that sort of thing, to me, there's no place for you on a show like this. And it is not the fact that I dislike Martell, because I don't. It is definitely fun to give him a hard time. Not even gonna lie. But in terms of disliking the man, I don't know him well enough to dislike him. But do I like his what I feel like he gives me on the screen? No. But now that I know he's acting, I mean, I just don't know what to think. Okay. So anyway, I like that Stormy, talks about how, you know, the fans of the show, can sometimes be a little much, according to her. And she references Tiffany as well as a testament to that, right? I like to think of it as the fans being passionate, which is something that you really want in a show. It makes it gives you, you want a cult following. I mean, I just gotta say that you do. I mean, that's what makes a show great. But she does talk about how, something that you work hard for. I guess she was alluding to maybe her business and people coming for her business as a result of thinking that she was recording Melody in her home. And Stormy talks about, you, Mel, know this because A, she likes Mel, and B, she gives Mel props for building Love and Marriage Huntsville. But Stormy also doesn't want it to be a thing between the two of them because her mama doesn't like her. And I would have to say that, unfortunately, it's probably a little too late for Miss Betty on the likability front, mostly because, to be honest with you guys, Melody is a huge force on this show. Okay. And she has a lot of fans. And so, somebody coming at Melody specifically when you kind of almost have to pull your punches when you're arguing with somebody's mama a little bit. Um, we've seen this before. We've seen a mama come on the show, have it out with with Melody, and then usually those fans do not like that person, and we usually don't see them anymore. I mean, we haven't seen Miss Wanda, Destiny gone, and I'm not saying that it's because of that. I'm just pointing out a fact that it usually doesn't bode well for the person who comes at her, specifically because it doesn't really seem like she did anything to Stormy's mom. That issue is between Stormy and Melody, and the two of them only, right? So anyway, Stormy's mom says, "You don't like me and I don't like you and we're good." And Melody's like, "I've never even said I didn't like you. Um, but you don't have to like me, and God bless you on your journey." Okay. Miss Betty says, "Well, I didn't like your ways at first. Now I just don't like you." Anyway, Carlos is like, "Well, where do things stand between you, Melody, and Stormy today?" And Stormy says she has respect for Melody. Well, she says y'all, so I'm not sure if she means the show or just Melody, um, because they've done some amazing things. Next, we talk about Stormy having to fire Junior. We learned that Junior now has a new job as a manager in a restaurant. So, he made the right move for him so that he doesn't have to come into conflict with Stormy anymore as a result of maybe potentially slacking off or not doing something, the right way, and then it affecting their relationship. So that was nice. We also learned that Aunt Lisa turned down the opportunity to be on the telly, okay, at the reunion. That's how much she don't like Aunt Lisa. I mean, that's how much Aunt Lisa don't like Miss Betty, okay? She ain't gonna even come down to the reunion, okay, to talk about Miss Betty because she don't want to be around her that bad. She didn't want to hug the lady, and Miss Betty ain't got no hope that they're gonna ever resolve the issues, okay? The next segment, Keke is back out as well as Chris and Nell Fletcher. We learned that Nell didn't want to do Love and Marriage Huntsville in the beginning. Um, Carlos wants to know why they were offended by not being invited to the Expo, the event of the year. And Chris is like, well, we've been in business for 30 years and, they got more than one business. And Nell says, well, Tisha said she was going to make sure we were part of it. But Latisha has obviously forgotten about that. Okay. And she just said, well, I didn't have time and I wanted it to be just the core six. And I can't remember if Stormy or if it was Chris said, well, but you invited Stormy. And, that's the truth. Okay. You did invite Stormy. So why couldn't you invite us? So it does come across as a little bit purposeful that she wouldn't. And then Marceau goes into this idea of, well, I knew Chris was in real estate, and then I found out he had a cleaning company, but I thought it was kind of sexist of him to just talk about his businesses and not talk about his wife. And in my notes I wrote, you play too much. And Carlos is like, you calling somebody sexist is rich. And it really is. And I couldn't tell if in this moment Marceau was really just looking for a moment and he wanted to have something to say to stir the pot. Because I felt like that was his MO throughout the reunion. And I think just seeing it in this moment, it was kind of like, I felt like there's a fine line between like coming in and pulling things out of people and then just sort of going ham. And I felt like at this point in time, he was just kind of going ham to make mess. You know what I'm saying? And I felt like that to me was okay, we see what you're doing. And it's not really given, I think, what you think is given in this moment. Personally, that's how I felt because I had seen it so much. Anyway, so Carlos calls out the friction between Latisha and Nell and Miss Nell, and he wants to know, well, why did Latisha want to know about their cheating scandal? And Latisha was like, well, I was just being direct. I've been on the show for 6 years, and so I've learned to be direct. Okay, so Carlos is like, turns to Nell. How did you find out your husband was cheating on you, Miss Nell? And the way Miss Nell was looking, baby, she was like, now say what now? Okay. Um, and Carlos had to tell her, welcome to Huntsville, baby. This is what you signed up for. You gotta talk about it. All right. She basically says that somebody told her it was not the other woman. Okay. And she wouldn't let up until she got the truth out of Chris Fletcher. And Carlos says, Chris, well, when you cheated on Nell, were there multiple women's? Was there 20 women's? No, it was just one. They did separate for 18 months, and she forgave him because she says love makes you do all types of crazy things. To be honest with you, cheating is not necessarily always going to be the deal breaker in a lot of marriages, mostly because there is an aspect of marriage that does become a business, and you really have to weigh the pros and cons of it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's also an important thing to remember. People say, like, when you get married, it's for real, you commit to death do you part. Now, whether or not that stays the case, I mean, is up to the individual person. But I think that when it comes down to stuff like this, I think it depends on what was your intent. Like, okay, granted, the intent is probably not going to ever look good to the other person. But like, I have this thing where I've been thinking about it recently, and I had this issue with a friend of mine, and it's relevant but not relevant at the same time. But I want you to understand and hear me. And I began to think about to myself, like, you know, this person, I felt like it was a friend of mine, somebody that I considered to be really, really close, literally tried to destroy me. Okay. I've never had anybody do anything like this to me before. And I was just kind of like, versus having a conversation with me, I just wish, that if we had a conversation before we fell out like that, I would have been like, okay, cool. I understand where you're coming from. But to simply just like go the distance to try, like, that's intentional to me. So that's the type of thing that I don't ever know that I would ever be able to bounce back from. Whereas somebody that, who I love makes a mistake, that's a little something different. And I think that you really just have to weigh the pros and cons of it. Listen, is your life better with this person or is your life better without them? And then can you move beyond this thing? You have to make it a thing where it is it a deal breaker for you? And then what are they doing to rectify the situation? You really have to look at it like that. And I think if both people were willing to come back together and make something happen and be different, more power to you. Okay. Um, what was the reason why they wanted Mel and Martell to work? And yes, that's part of the reason because they themselves worked it out as well. Nell says that she could see that they still loved each other, and she could also see some of the things that Fletcher had going on at the time in Martell, like cockiness and being arrogant. And she told Martell that that was gonna cause him to lose his family, and ultimately it did. Now, Mel tells us that the Fletchers will be at their house until the wee hours in the morning, y'all, trying to give them counseling, and that they didn't choose sides. All right, so then Houston comes up, all right, the group trip, and Carlos wants to know who was the one man that Martell invited into the heist. Martell says he don't even he don't even know her name. He don't know her name. You don't know my name. And so she just came there to give him a massage. Okay. She was there about an hour and a half. He also says they didn't have relations. Mel was like, well, where was the massage table? He was like, my bed. And Mel says a licensed massage therapist is gonna have a massage, like a massage bed or whatever, and or a table. And Martell says I didn't ask to see her license. I guess given the time of night, because basically, um, at the end of the day, later on, we will find out that Kimmy is going to basically put it out there that Mel, you too had a massage therapist come to the house. Okay. Now I was like, no, ooh, yeah, okay, Kimmy, oh, give us the tea, sis, spill it. The difference was that while well, it's not really a difference because Martell had a woman and Mel had a woman. Now, the thing about it is because of the late night creeping heat of the night hours that Martell was getting said massage, it does make it seem like it was not massage envy, if you know what I mean. It seemed as though it might have been a, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You know what I'm saying? Type of situation. Because again, it was in the heat of the night when nobody else was around. I'm assuming that Mel's was probably something in the middle of the day or whatever. And when asked about it, she does say that she used an app called Zeal. Okay. Now, Martell will later on take her answer as she told him not to and says that, yes, that's what I did too. And nobody believes him because, A, he is not believable. I don't believe hardly anything that comes out of his mouth. And he has proven himself to be less than credible when it comes to just anything. I mean, why should we trust the actor in general? And why would you trust? I would also wager to think, why would I trust somebody who is also willing to derail himself in trying to uh uh take someone else out? What do I mean by that? You would basically call yourself an actor and discredit the show for which you are a producer on, and I'm assuming still being paid for. You would you would go out swinging, okay? You would die on that hill, throwing your own show under the bus and all the people who work for that show by calling yourself an actor, discrediting everything that you have done on this show only for only to try to get back at someone else. You would it's like the equivalent of what they say about, well, you're digging a grave for me, but you're also digging one, you will fall into that grave. Okay. Um it just he's just so nonsensical to me. Um, it comes up about, you know, Nell feeling disrespected and um with him having somebody over at the house. I guess my thing is this, like, if I let's just say for the sake of argument that Nell purchased the Airbnb with her own money or whatever like that. Let's just say for the sake of argument. In real life, that's how it would be, right? Or it could be. I would have a problem with anybody having somebody over if I don't know about it. The reason why is because these Airbnbs are very, very specific these days about what you can do and what you cannot do. Even so much that they be having cameras and things like that, on the door, and the people be looking, okay, to see who coming in and who going. I don't even think I don't know. Did I mention this when it came up in the episode about the time I went to um Palm Springs, and baby, I had to fill out all type of documentations about who was going to be there, who was coming in and out. So that's to me why I would feel disrespected if anybody did that and I did not know. Okay. Specifically, that you got people coming in the middle of the night. Okay. Now, if everybody had pitched in and, maybe at that point, I would not feel so bad about it. That's the only way I could see I would feel disrespected personally. Now, if Mel is okay with it, to be honest with you, that ain't the reason why I would be upset about it or find it disrespectful. Because she's clearly moved on. He's free to do whatever he want to do. He is a single man. I'm just saying that I like to know what's going on in the place that I have set up for myself and the people that I didn't brought. Okay, that's it. Anyway, he says that he didn't have relations with that woman. Okay. He didn't have the big O down to the Houston. Um, anyway, why did Martell get so upset about Nell defending Melody? Here's the thing. He claims that, she's coming at him about stuff that happened years ago. And Mel has allegedly done the same thing. So, of course, we got to go back and forth about this. And in my mind, I'm kind of like, I really don't want to argue about this. I don't want to see no more argumentation about it. At the end of the day, I kind of feel like it's almost like the Latisha and Marcel situation. I guess it's a little different though, because the Latisha and Marcel situation, there are names being thrown out, although I don't know what they are because they are being bleeped. But I would just wager to say that if you don't have proof that she has cheated, I don't want to hear about this situation anymore. The only person that we know of that there's proof in black and white and in the form of a baby is actually Martell. So let's just leave it at that and move on and never speak of this subject ever again. It comes up about Chris allowing Martell to speak to Miss Nell so disrespectfully. And I asked that same question, and I think the viewers did too. And I'm like, as Chris get the stuttering and stammering, I just feel like, Chris, you just don't, in my on the show, at least. I don't know about in real life. I just kind of feel like the same way you couldn't make this man get up out this house that you allowed him to rent or whatever, how that worked. I feel like is the same reason why you have not stood up to this man for screaming and yelling at your wife. At the end of the day, all it's going to take is like, listen, bro, don't be screaming at my wife. I don't appreciate that. Period. End of story. You know, Melody reveals that she's had to have conversations with Chris off camera about this and how disrespectful it was for Martell to be speaking to her that way. And I did find it disrespectful. Personally, like I felt like it was crazy for him to be speaking to her that way, whether it was at her own home or whether it was in front of the group while they were down to the Houston. Like screaming and carrying on like that, like you as my friend, you cannot talk to my significant other that way. Like there is no way that's going to happen. And if you do, then we will never speak again because I just don't play like that. I will not disrespect your spouse, and you definitely should not be disrespecting mine because we both know that I'm not going to disrespect yours. Period. That's just how it rolls. It's just not going to happen like that. So if you value my friendship, you won't be disrespecting my wife or my husband that way. You just won't. Across the board, it's not going to happen. Um, so it comes up with whether or not Martell owes Miss Nell an apology, and he's like, "Well, we both owe each other apologies." And Miss Nell is like, "Well, you walked up on me though," and Martell is like, "Well, I'm sorry for doing that. But if a woman raised her voice, and a man can raise his voice back, that's a woman overstepping her boundaries." And it's just like, and then Marceau comes in with the and then playing the woman card. And Miss Nell asserts that women have a voice too. I just think that there's like, for as much as Martell claims to be this Southern gentleman, remember back when he was wanting to walk Mel to her car because he could not fathom the idea of her walking to her car alone in the parking lot? Well, I feel like too, like for as much respect as you say that you have for women, for the way that you yell and scream at them is a completely different, like, it don't match. It's hypocrisy at its finest. You can't respect women and then find yourself yelling back and forth at them when to be honest with you, Nell wasn't even yelling at him. And both times he did it to her, I felt like he was the one who was yelling, and she ended up yelling back at him, right? Especially down to the Houston. Nobody was even talking about him. They were talking about Keke, and Martell made that situation about him. And it was like, bro, like you are just like a little toddler on the screen at this point in time. Like it's nonsensical to me. Anyway, um, did Tisha feel disrespected by Keke coming on the trip? Yes, she did, because she don't want to be around this woman ever again. Um, when Carlos asked Miss Nell about why she invited Keke, was it important? Why was it important to invite her? And Miss Nell was like, it wasn't, because I didn't think it was. I thought it could have popped off. And Tisha says that the relationship with Keke is dead forever, and their family does want them to work it out, but she is like Aunt Lisa, and she's like, I don't want to see this woman no more. So Carlos admits that Kiki's initial integration into the show was great because she had the relationship with Melody. She's also family with Latisha, and so it did add a familial element to a show that is kind of heavily based on this like family and friendship dynamic. And the question is asked, well, did you use Latisha to get on the show and then throw her under the bus to further yourself on the show, right? And she says that was not her intention. The plan was always for her to be brought onto the show. And she says somewhere along the way, it was Latisha who changed. So Latisha says that that Keke has a lot of issues, and there's been some issues that haven't come up on the show yet, and those issues could ruin her family. So at this point, whatever comes out, comes out. Now, in my mind, again, this is one of those situations that's very interesting to me, because it's like, if you know that she has all these issues, then why would you want to bring her onto the show in the first place? If you knew that she had these issues, you were telling, allegedly at the time, Martell and Melody, even before she came onto the show, about her issues without her knowledge, right? So why would you do that? If you knew back then that she had those issues, why would you want to bring her on the show and then say, oh, never mind, you got a lot of issues, girl, and all of these things could come out, but you were also the ones telling her issues at the same time. So this segment didn't really make a lot of sense to me with regards to Latisha's responses. And when it comes up, Keke also says there are only two things that could have come out about her. She says one being her addiction to the prescription pain pills, and then the second thing was the issues within her marriage, the cheating. Okay, so Martell, if you notice, was scrunching his face up, looking like he didn't believe her, and he says to Marceau, "Well, that ain't it, is it?" And Marceau is like, "No." So then Martell says aloud, well, Marceau said it's one more thing. And Keke says, that's a lie. Please tell it. Okay. Marceau says, let the record state that Marceau has never revealed any new information about anybody on the show. Well, you did reveal that you was picking her up off the streets because nobody else would pick her up. That was new to me. Okay. I think you actually said it during the show when the show, like, did he not say that on the show after she had threw the drink at Latisha? So you have released some information. So then Tisha says, well, it's their story to tell. And I'm like, but you just told us that she has been cheating on her husband and that he has been cheating on her and that she ended up paying for a date for him and another person. So you two have definitely done that. Now I'm not saying it wasn't warranted, but I'm saying you can't say that you didn't do that, okay? Because you did. So Kiki says she's got nothing to be ashamed of, and she does want to mend their relationship with Latisha. And I'm like, well, girl, it don't. That's not what it looked like, okay? And admits that she has gone for the jugular when she has felt like she needed to defend herself. And Carlos hopes for the sake of their daughters, since they, that because the daughters are best friends. And that's when Latisha admits that she's been making up excuses as to why they can't go around there no more. And then she reveals that Kiki tried to block Latisha's daughter's number out of Kiki's daughter's phone. Now, Kiki also denies this. Carlos shuts this conversation down because he's like, we're not going to talk about the kids. Okay. But speaking of kids, uh, Tisha, you took a pregnancy test, although your husband has had a vasectomy on camera. Martell then says cheaters. And I'm like, this is one of those segments that you should probably just be quiet, friend. Like, just little buddy, just chill over there. And you just sit over there and you rock your red suit. That's it, friend. That's it, friend. That's it. Don't you say not another word. So Latisha says that she was having the same symptoms that she had when she was expecting. Um, but Marceau does believe that she could step out on him because he's like, well, does she have a vajayjay in her mouth? And in my mind, I was like, that is like the most crass thing that you could say at this moment in time. Like, this is your wife that you're talking about, the mom of your kids. So you talking about, does she have a vajayjay in her mouth? Like, what kind of mess is that? I was actually just kind of disgusted because I'm like, the way you just talking so reckless about her. I understand that your job and your role, maybe as your self-proclaimed role on the show, is the jokester and the person that can stir up the mess. But dang, when you throw your wife, at least when I'm watching Dr. Heavenly and I know she's, stirring up the juice, one thing she ain't gonna do is throw daddy under the bus. And I'm just looking at you like, dang, you do not care at all about how she comes across or how your relationship comes across on the screen. Now, maybe because you know it's something different behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, it's like, bro, like that's just like kind of the way you're kind of just reducing your wife to a mouth and of a JJ. Anyway, um, and Carlos is like, well, I'm asking about her character. And Marceau says basically any woman out there that goes to a bar could have messed up or messed around and made a bad decision. But the same could be said for a man. Like, that's no different. Anybody, that can happen to anybody. Latisha's like, well, if you're married and you don't have trust, then what are you doing here? I mean, that's a good question. Marceau says it's about capability versus probability. Okay. Is she capable? Yes. Is it probable? No. So why are you giving her all this fever? Anyway, Carlos reminds him that she is stuck by him through all of the 20 women's scandals, every little thing that's come up about him. And the way he talks so reckless about her is just a travesty. But listen, if she like it, I love it. Um, did y'all notice that Martell happened to comment about Tisha's body yet again? Lusting. What you looking this good for? Anyway, Carlos asked Tisha if she stepped out on Marceau, would she be in? Carlos asked the group, the ladies, if Tisha stepped out on Marceau, would she be in her right to do that? And I felt like it was a fair question because of all the things that have gone on and been said about him. And Kimmy is very incensed about this. She's like, well, why would you say that? Why would you say that? And I'm like, it's a fair question to me. Um, During the commercial break, Kiki calls Marceau a lying bi, okay? A bitch. She says he's lying about the street walking, and apparently he only picked her up twice. So he's just kind of sitting there. He's like, um, she looks at and she says something like, "Don't look at me, B." She calls him a B, the B word, basically, like just like Stormy did. And so Marceau says, "Well, come and get me then." Latisha then she got her fan in her hand. She says, "I bet you won't cross this line. Cross it and see. You got away one time with doing something like that, but you won't. It won't happen again." Kiki says, "B, you don't know me." Now, what I will say is this, Latisha, since the first time she did it to you and you ain't do nothing, and I understand because you on TV, so you won't want to act a fool or nothing like that, because Nene always said if you do something, I could have. Did Nene say this? I thought she might have said it. Be smart enough not to do it on the camera. Anyway, what I was gonna say is I think it's really easy to say that now that you have distance and security in place. However, comma.org, Kiki don't look like somebody I would want to try to fight. Especially if, as you made it seem, if you are so concerned about her being back on that stuff, somebody being on some stuff is the last person I'm trying to fight. Okay? If you believe that. That's just me. So Carlos basically tells the group that this was his favorite reunion. He thanks all the peoples for being there and their contributions. And a lot of them do embrace each other at the end, which was nice to see. But my question for you guys is, who do you think will be back next season? My prediction would be that Chris and Nell will be in the title intro cards. Stormy, I think, and Courtney will also be back. Hopefully I wonder if we'll get to see Kiki back. That's the thing. Do you guys want to see Kiki back? And do you think she will be back after everything that's happened? Because I need to know what's going on with the Crime Stoppers. Like, what happened with that? I need to see who she's going to be able to mix it up with next season, because by the looks of things, the only people that she really got to film with on her side would be Melody and Courtney and Stormy. And then I want to know what's going to happen with Melody and Stormy's relationship, because quite frankly, I think that that's fixable. I really do. I think it's fixable. Latisha and Stormy, I don't know. I don't know. That's the one I don't know about. I don't know about that one. And then the question also is, do you think that we will see Miss Betty next season? Because nope, we ain't seen Miss Wanda. So anyway, that is my recap of Love and Marriage Huntsville. Thank you guys for tuning in, tapping in, and rocking with us all season long. Next up on the list is Love and Marriage DC. So I'm super excited about that. The season looks lit, so I cannot wait to dive in with y'all. Make sure you guys have subscribed to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I will catch you in the next video.